Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you all back to our live streaming. We do want to apologize for the delay and having some challenges with our tech. So this, going forward, we will not see any stoppage in the video. So getting started again, my name is Wali Abdul-Hanifzai.
And I am Lamba Aziz-Hanifzai.
We hope you guys are doing well. The Aziz-Hanifzai Foundation would love to welcome Mr. Brandon Lee. And also we have Mr. Jonathan Webb, who will be doing sign language for those that are partaking in this program. So a little bit about ourselves. What the Aziz-Hanifzai Foundation does is that we offer affordable mental health care services to couples, individuals, families, and children here in Orange County and the greater Los Angeles area. We are here to help individuals and families who are in need of services. So we can only see individuals that are here in the state of California, right? We can practice here. What we are applying to do is what our goal is also through the Aziz-Hanifzai Foundation is to reach out to different educators like Mr. Brandon Lee, who's here with us today, and to be able to educate the community with different topics. One of the important matters that we are taking place today, and we will discuss, is addressing the mental health within the Black and the African American community. So for that, I would like to have Lamba give the bio for Mr. Lee.
So before introducing Brandon Lee, we wanted to share the reason behind why Aziz-Hanifzai Foundation wants to discuss this important topic, the topic of mental health in the Black community. And the reason behind this is what we're seeing right now is the protests outside in California and other states, as well as other countries, who are supporting the protest that's focused on George Floyd's death and the Black Lives Matter movement. And so over the past few years, what we have seen is an increase in police brutality. But in reality, what we want to address today is police brutality has occurred for centuries. And what we're seeing now is due to social media and news and other, live streams like Facebook and Instagram, we're seeing and becoming more aware of these brutalities, versus in the past, we didn't have these means to be able to connect and to notice what's going on in our sister and brother states. And so a statistic I want to begin with is, since January 1st of 2015, 1,252 Black people have been shot and killed by police, according to the Washington Post database tracking police shootings. That doesn't even include those who died in police custody or were killed using other methods. So for a while, there has been this illusion that there has been no racism, that racism had ended, and that we were living in a country where everyone loves each other and doesn't judge them based on skin color, race, or any other kind of characteristics. But that's what it is. It is just a delusion. So in today's session, the Aziz-Hanifzai Foundation aims to address the reality of the suffering in the Black community and the impact on the mental health. We want to go ahead and take a minute to thank Brandon Lee for making time to be here today and to discuss this topic. And we would like to share a short bio about Brandon Lee. Brandon's work experience and education is in the field of psychology and social work, and has provided him with many great experiences and opportunities in his life. As a Black male from Alabama, he has had the privilege of gaining many life lessons in the work he has done. His passion for human behavior started as being the oldest of three and attempting to understand his siblings and how his upbringing would ultimately mold them. Fast forward some years, and Brandon never thought that he would find himself attending the University of Hartford studying psychology. Brandon always considered himself a people's person and felt this was a great way that he could learn to connect with an individual on a deeper and personal level. His college experience, with its ups and downs, provided this sheltered void the experience and opportunity to experience and see the world in a whole new light. His future work in mental health, case management, and substance abuse will continue to challenge him in new ways and create a desire for him to obtain more knowledge. In 2015, after being out of undergraduate school, he decided it was time for something more. After deciding to continue his education, Brandon relocated to Los Angeles to attend the University of Southern California School of Social Work and obtain his master's in social work. Once that was completed, Brandon relocated back to the East Coast to Boston. And currently he's in a program, he's a program coordinator for the Psychiatric Emergency Services at Boston Medical Center. Being in this current leadership role has let him enhance his role of working with the majority dual diagnosis who are actually an underserved population and face many barriers such as homelessness, addiction, and poverty. As a Black male, Brandon is honored and privileged to be a part of this fulfilling career and looks forward to continuing to obtain knowledge, experiences, and insight to better serve this population. So, Brandon, we would like to thank you for being here today and making the time to address the topic of the day.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Again, thank you for coming. We're very happy and we're very honored to have you with us today. So the first question that we would want to ask you is, what does the mental health in the Black community or the African American community looks like? And are folks seeking services, or is this just a stigma, right? And then the other thing I wanted to suggest, me and Lamba wanted to ask was, are therapists appropriately trained to be culturally competent with this population in your perspective at the moment?
Okay. Well, again, thanks for that introduction and thanks for having me. So to answer your first question, I feel that mental health in the African American community right now is very scarce. It's lacking. It's something that's been going on in this country for hundreds of years at this time. As we all know, mental illness does not discriminate. It affects all of us in different ways, different manners, culture, background, age, race, it doesn't matter. But for African Americans, though, it is affecting us a lot worse. Studies show that 10% of African Americans are more likely to experience some type of increased psychological stress, whether that is depression, anxiety, trauma, and we can go as far as experiencing suicidal thoughts. But only 30% of the African American communities in this country receive the adequate mental health support as compared to the average 43% in this country. According to the CDC, recently, suicide rates have risen 56% across teens in all of America from 2001 to 2017. But for African American adolescents, those rates have risen 60%. And for males, and nearly double for females. So that right there is showing that due to this lack of mental health treatment, not only are we suffering more, but our children are dying from suicide rates. Not only due to this recent, oppression and brutality, we're also starting to, injure ourselves because we're not being treated with the proper treatment for mental health services. As far as the stigma regarding to mental health, that's something that I am a strong advocate against in regards to encouraging people to always seek mental health treatment. Mental health within this country is still a taboo to this day. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. A lot of people don't want to address it. It's something that we've pushed to the side for, at this time, I think, way, way too long. But also within the African American community, it's more so of a stigma because, African Americans, we suffered through slavery, oppression, discrimination. And with that, we've become a resilient race. We've come to learn how to handle a lot of barriers in our life. In that, it's created this sense of, if we're strong enough to get through slavery, we're strong enough to get through oppression, then depression and anxiety, that's nothing. That we can handle that. That's something that we don't have to really talk about or fight about because we are a strong, proud race. But that's something that we still need to address. And the stigma really is really deep rooted into the community, I feel. Even from the family, it's just taboo to talk about depression or anxiety with your family members, with your social friends, with your community as a whole, because sometimes it can be seen as you're not being strong enough and you seem crazy or you seem weak. And that's just a stigma that is plagued mental health and within the African American community. In regards to the training and cultural competency, that's key here, and I think that's going to be like at the root of our full discussion today. It's something that over my past couple of years of training and schooling, I have seen more of, but it definitely needs to be more prevalent in training with new hires, education within social work schools, psychology, because when you treat someone, whether you're treating their mental health, whether you're treating their physical health, if you just primarily look at the symptoms and don't really take into account to the cultural, social, economic, political background that specific culture may have faced, then you're really doing that person and that culture a disservice, because all of those background factors make up that person, though, that culture, that all of it's one, whether it's negative or positive, that makes what that culture is. And if you don't understand that, then you fully can't help that culture move or heal or treat them properly. It's something that definitely needs to be more on the forefront. And something that needs to be continued, because this is an ongoing issue to learn. So, yeah.
So how does systemic racism fit into this, Brendan? So, for example, growing up in the U.S., I migrated here from a different country, and at the age of 9, ever since I've been here in the U.S., I've heard the saying that America is a land of opportunity, that you come to America to fulfill your dreams, and it's a place of privilege and being able to attain goals that you can't do in other countries. But through my experience of growing up in this country, I've learned that that's actually not the case, that this land of opportunity doesn't provide the same benefits to all people, that there's individuals who struggle because they're in a wrong neighborhood and they grow up in a neighborhood where there's less resources or the teachers are burnt out. So how does systemic racism kind of impact this, and how does privilege impact this?
That's a good question. It impacts it a lot. It's something that this country was basically built on, was systemic racism, in institutions that their goal was to either drive out other cultures or people that were not within their own group, or keep them at such a level where they didn't pose a threat to them and they made them feel lesser than. We've seen these type of systems in this country, from slavery to Jim Crow laws to separate but equal schoolings to the prohibitions on African Americans being able to buy land or vote. And those that I have mentioned, yes, we've kind of come to a point where we've had victories and we've been able to eliminate a lot of those barriers. But unfortunately to say, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to that systemic racism, because we're still dealing with a disproportion in regards to the African American community and our white counterparts. For example, a lot of research shows that unemployment rates for African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans are considerably higher than a national average. Within the U.S., the average mean of income for the white household is 10 times greater than Black households, and even 8 times greater than Hispanic households. So right there, that shows a lot, that even though we've been a part of this country since the beginning, you want to say, and we still have such a gap in the ability to obtain wealth, the ability to own property. There's minority home ownerships are at an all-time low as well. There's still barriers for minorities to be able to get a mortgage loan, to start a home, to buy a home, to start a family, which that's supposed to be the American dream, that anyone can come here and fulfill those objectives. Yet there are so many barriers towards minorities that they can't fill those objectives.
So can you provide some knowledge, some information in regards to how the systemic racism was established? So some history in what was the purpose? How was it established? What kind of impact is it having on today?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, how it was established, it kind of dates back to slavery. And I want to say the reason why it was established was to keep power, to keep control of those certain, what do you want to call it, resources or organizations. And if you didn't have that, then I guess the communities that they've been suppressing for so long would have kind of risen up a while ago. And that's just been deeply rooted within our society in different levels from politics. One thing I do want to bring up in regards to the institutional systemic racism is our justice system. That's a huge one right now because African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans are disproportionately affected by the criminal justice systems on all levels than the average white American. Our jails and prison systems are filled with minorities. Minorities usually face more higher sentencing and rougher charges, even though research has showed that despite the different racial and ethnic backgrounds, that those groups usually will commit crimes at roughly the same rate. So in regards to systemic racism and its foundation, I feel like its foundation is based on just keeping control and trying to keep control of people you don't want within your group.
Thank you for answering that. And I wanted to ask the question, in my undergrad degree, I learned that the impact of implicit biases, right? For example, and studies have shown that if an individual who's a Caucasian, right, in their name, it's a white person with a Caucasian name, is most likely to be called for a job interview compared to somebody who was, whose name was, associated, with somebody's name being black. Can you share how implicit biases instill not only fear towards black individuals, but also dehumanizes them?
Yes, definitely. It's a good question. So first of all, implicit bias itself, that is the mental process that stimulates negative attitudes of people who are not members of one's own group. So usually this bias sometimes unconsciously leads to an automatic discrimination against that said person, that said group, that you have towards. A lot of implicit bias usually comes from our environment that we're in. So like you said, Wali, if you have an individual that's never interacted with other cultures or black people before, what they're getting, their knowledge about black people is coming from a source other than black people. So if you have all of these negative sources, then you're probably most likely going to have a negative view towards African Americans. And that stems back to how African Americans for quite some time in this country were referred to as ape-like, less than the negative notation that we were dangerous. So that in turn started to, implement on people, and their biases grew to think that all African Americans were these less than human creatures, which in turn dehumanized us for a long period, and to this day it still does. And not only does it dehumanize us, but it also puts fear in the community, because if we feel like that's how they perceive us and that they don't want us here and they want to get rid of us, then we tend to fear. And when you face something that you fear, it's hard, and it puts a lot of stress and barriers on your life and community as well. So yeah, the bias within this country has definitely stemmed and was rooted deeply over the past 300 years, I'd have to say.
And to add on to that, because you brought up a really important aspect of dehumanization, and this is something that we've seen over the past few years with Flint and the water situation that is happening there. Flint doesn't have clean water, and in a way our society has become desensitized to that. Can you speak more about that as well, this dehumanization process and social media, the news, and other outlets desensitizing the society to make this seem a normality.
Yes, I agree with that, and I think social media plays a huge role, and media in general, especially within the last week and the events that are going on. It's that the media, which I feel like they have a lot more responsibility to not to do, have in turn tried to change the narrative and show specific African Americans in a light that's less than great, where it comes to the looting and the burning of things. And that, again, creates bias on others that this is all we do. This is all that we're capable of doing, which that is not the truth. And they take away from the actual meaning in the story that we're marching and protesting about is the life that was taken from an innocent Black man on the streets that was recorded and shown all over the world. So how the media portrays us as people is very important, and I do want to hold them up to a higher standard, because again, that creates more implicit bias towards us, and that's just going to go down generation from generation, just as the bias that people have towards us now started years and decades ago, through imaging, through words, through stories. It kind of continues on.
Thank you. And I think the other really important aspect that you mentioned is the Black Lives Movement, and how, that has become a hashtag that almost caught fire and is being spread.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, what we're seeing in other communities who may not be supporting this movement is the hashtag of all lives movement, mm-hmm. right? All lives matter. And so in a way, it seems that even that's trying to dehumanize that movement, desensitize that movement.
Mm-hmm.
As well. Can you speak a bit more about that as well?
Yeah, and I definitely noticed the static that the statement "All Lives Matter" has been getting against the hashtag of Black Lives Matter. And what I want to say to that is that, of course, all lives matter. This is not what we are saying. What we are saying is that our lives are being lost at an astounding rate to the police brutality, to just injustice, period. And we just want to be heard and seen. And again, we kind of take it back to the media, where they're making it seem that we don't care about other lives, but that is not the case. And it goes back to that bias, and then the true message is that we just want to be heard, we want to feel safe in our country, gets lost to the rest of the world.
And I wanted to ask Brandon, since we're in this specific topic of even like Mr. George Floyd, who was killed, is the community's anger justifiable, and why is it?
Yes, I'd have to say yes. The anger is justifiable. It's jarring when in this country you can wake up like it's a regular day, watch the news or open your phone, and without warning, there's a video of a Black man being murdered in the street during the daylight on a Tuesday. That angers me just saying it out loud. So I can only imagine people who saw that in that specific community, who've experienced that personally. And I think when you add incidents like this in years of oppression and discrimination and violence towards a community and a certain group of people, there's only one logical solution, and that's anger, that's resentment, that's pushback, that is desperation to stay alive, to have a voice be heard. And I think that's what we're seeing nowadays. We're seeing a lot of anger, we're seeing a lot of desperation, we're seeing a lot of fear,
Right.
of uncertainty, because do our lives really matter? And I think a lot of people in the African American culture have that question on our mind, and they don't know the answer. I feel like they don't feel like this country cares about them or about us.
So, Brandon, this is something I kind of want to touch base on too, because you brought up so many important points. And as mental health practitioners, you brought up this idea of fear, right? This fear that has been instilled into the Black community and has been there over the past many generations, ever since we come to the U.S. But what I wanted to focus on and kind of change gears is this biological level. So as mental health practitioners in our schooling, we learn how there are different systems in our brain and there are different functions in our brain that are responsible for different things towards different reactions. So there's a system in our brain that's called the autonomic nervous system, and it receives fear signals from the amygdala. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is the ANS is responsible for this response when we're sensing danger. So our body either fights, flights, or freezes. And so it's so important to focus on the ANS and the responses our body creates when we are in a state of fear, because if you think about it, the Black community has been in a state of fear for such a long time. This is a community that has been targeted, has been mistreated, has been abused, has been prosecuted. And it's a community that has been living in a state of trauma for many centuries. So my question to you here is, since the Black community has been living in a state of trauma and has been dehumanized and is in a state of survival, how, as mental practitioners, can we not only spread the message of the protests that are going on right now, but also create an understanding of why the protesters are fighting back now? Because what I'm hearing a lot from friends, from neighbors, through social media, through different outlets, is the fact that, okay, well, people are looting, people are breaking things. And the reality is you have a community that's been prosecuted for so long. They've tried peaceful tactics, they've tried peaceful protests, and they weren't working. Now you're cornering them into a wall. How else do you expect them to react? So can you connect that biological piece to the intergenerational trauma and speak more on it?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. So, like you just said, the intergenerational trauma is a huge piece to this. Stemming back to slavery, which was a huge ordeal for Black people. It creates so much trauma and issues within our culture to this day. It was a traumatizing experience, and it's been passed down from generation to generation to generation, and it will continue to get passed down because it's a part of who we are. And with that being said, it's created a lot of resilience within the Black and African American culture and communities, and we've really reclaimed a lot of our heritage and kind of created this roadmap to get to where we are today. But we cannot ignore that this trauma, this intergenerational trauma, has scarred us. It's affected us in ways that range from mental health to physical health to just, like you said, living in fear, basically on almost a consistent basis. And it would be a disservice if we ignored that part that happened to us. In regards to how intergenerational trauma is like connecting to what's happening, what we're seeing today, like you said, we're getting backed into a corner. And like any dangerous experience that someone may face, whether that's, I think the age-old story is being attacked by a bear. You're either going to fight, you're either going to flee, or you're just going to freeze. We all are going to have that. We're human. That's in us. And I think we fleed, we frozen, and I think now we're at a fight response. And I think that's what a lot of people are seeing, and where they're just so tired and they've been backed into this corner that they see no way out. They feel like they need to fight to survive. They feel like they need to fight to be heard. And I think that's what we're really seeing over the past week or so, and over the past few years. Like, I think the community, the Black community, is at a point where we feel like we need to fight back.
I recently read this post that indicated, it was actually posted by a woman of a Caucasian race, saying that when there is danger and she sees a cop around, she feels so comfortable going up to that cop and asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
There were some responses from people of color and some responses from Black people indicating if they needed help, the last person they would go to and ask for help is a cop, because what we've seen over the past few years is whenever help is asked and the police are involved, things end up really badly. So whether it's San Diego 2 years ago when, an African-American male had a mental health breakdown and his sister called the cops and said, hey, can you send a psychiatric emergency team because he needs assistance? The cops came and they shot him because they thought that a pen he had was a gun. So there's such a difference in reality when it comes to safety and who we see assistance from when it comes to safety. And so this is something really important for us to focus on, because since there is intergenerational trauma in the Black community, and there is trauma and fear revolved around police and the Navy and the Army and all these, institutions, how does including cops and the Navy SEALs and the National Guards and bringing the rubber bullets and bringing the tear gas, how is that impacting that, not only the trauma, but the response that we're talking about, the fight, flight, and freeze? Is it actually helping people calm down and feel more in control? Or is it doing the exact opposite? Is it triggering that trauma and leading into, okay, I have to fight?
Mm-hmm. I really thank you for that question. And I want to start off saying that to this day, if a cop is driving behind me, I feel anxiety go up. I may know that I have nothing to hide, that I did nothing wrong, but it's just, I think, innate, just a reaction that probably 99, if not all, Black people probably experience when they come in any type of contact with a police officer or anyone in that type of level of authority. And I feel like adding all these police force and adding their riot gear and tear gas, you are enhancing the trauma and triggering this community, our community, in such a strong way that I don't think they understand how hurtful it is. And because this is just continuing, like we've been talking about, that intergenerational trauma even further, because now with social media and our technological age, we see these protests. We see these violent acts live in time. This is not back in the civil rights movement where if you weren't there, you didn't see it, you maybe read about it days later. But now I can be on one side of the country or on the other side of the world and see exactly what's happening in Minneapolis in real time. And I worry about our young generation who have the access to these videos of us being tear gassed or beaten in the street. It's sad because that's just increasing the generational trauma that's to come. That, years from now, our children will be seeing this on news clips or articles or being able to look it up on their phone. And it's really triggering because I look back to what my ancestors faced through, reading the history books and seeing that they were attacked. And it seems the same. Right. And it really makes you think, has anything changed?
And how do you explain this to the younger generation? I have, a friend in my cohort in my current doctoral program who is Black, who has 2 Black boys. And her fear is when they leave the door and they go to school, I never know if they're going to come back or not. So now that we're seeing more protests outside and we're seeing, the news showing this, the social media showing this, kids talking about it. How do we explain this to our children? How do we explain this to Black children who see their brothers, their sisters, their community being targeted? How do we create a sense of safety for them?
Yeah.
Is that even realistic at this point?
And I do not envy that conversation. I do not have children right now. And it must be a hard conversation to sit down your Black or brown child, boy or girl, and have these conversations about what to do in the case of a cop stops you. I can't imagine having that conversation or with someone, but do I feel like I will eventually have to have that conversation? Yes, I definitely will. But it makes me think back to just my upbringing and my parents and all the lessons, which at the time I may not have fully understood. Like, why are you telling me this? Or no, that's not how it is. And then when you see it and you're forced to face it, and like you said, this is the reality that we live in, is that there have been so many Black people who left their homes thinking they were going to come back, and they never came back. Or in the incident of Breonna Taylor, who was sleeping, resting in her own home, and was shot and killed. So yeah, these are going to be tough conversations for our community for generations to come. And then when you add these hurtful and horrible imaging and videos to that conversation, it's just sad. It's sad all around, unfortunately.
So outside of this protest, as mental health practitioners as we are, or as we see, neighbors, friends, family members, we're seeing this current climate take, and situation that has been taking place in this nation and over time, right? With the difficulties that the Black and the African American community is going through. What can we do to help support the African American and the Black community?
Yeah. One thing I have seen, I've seen a lot of support, through social media. I know we have a long way to go, but just be an ally. I know that word has been used a lot in the past couple of days, but when I say be an ally, I mean really educate yourself on different cultural struggles that people and backgrounds face. Really get to know and just understand what some cultures have gone through, and that you'll never fully understand it because you didn't experience it, but at least to open your viewpoint to really understand why we have these fears, why we have these anxieties, and why we're having this reaction that we're having right now, and calling for justice for ourselves, our lives. And that's what I believe the Black community is asking for, is just for people to educate themselves. And I want to kind of tie it back into that bias. And it's very important that as we move forward and, as the new generations come up, that you are responsible as parents, teachers, practitioners, to teach the younger generations about the cultures and the differences within those cultures, and how some cultures have not been treated right through many years within this country. And I know that is a topic that is sore, especially when it comes to schools and, just the U.S. history as a whole. But it's going to be important to pass down, the truth to different generations, so that 20 years from now, we don't have more white children just have their idea of a Black person come from another white person, so that we don't have just imaging of us being, beaten in the street or murdered. So we don't have these biases that we believe that, only, Black people can only succeed if they're famous or play sports. Like, we have to stop that, and that starts with educating ourselves, and it continues with educating the future generations.
And I also wanted to ask Brandon, is how do you separate for instance, the youth from the older generation, right? In the African American and Black community, for instance, a lot of the youth, they have never experienced any brutality, or they have never stepped out of the house, right? But they're getting or receiving messages from those individuals who are veterans or who have been out, for a while, where either they have gone to prison, they've been wrongfully convicted, have been discriminated against. So how can we use innovative platforms to help get to the youth in that way possible?
Oh, good question. I think with that generational gap, because I remember growing up as a Black boy. I grew up in the 90s, good old 90s, and my parents, teaching me about civil rights, and even talking to my grandparents and all my older aunts and uncles, who've all been very influential in my life. So I thank them for that. But they did it in just, very creative ways, whether it's just adding to the education that I've already gotten from school, sharing a part of their history, whether it's like, oh, this is when I marched, or this is the experiences that I have, and really kind of peeling back that surface teaching of civil rights and really kind of being honest. And I think we have to, my generation, have to do the exact same, is really just be honest and say, like, this is how we were treated in this country. But things have changed, and things can change if we do it, if we keep on that course of fighting for social injustice, of holding individuals accountable for their actions against our communities. We have to stay strong. We have to stay vigilant in regards to exacting the social change.
Thank you. So, Brandon, there's another question I have for you.
Yeah,
as a practitioner myself who works with the youth, and I have clients who are males and they are Black, a big part of my work consists of, being culturally competent. And this is something I have to say and really hone in on is our education, while it is great, it's very limited. So we do learn about other cultures. We do learn about therapy modalities to use with other cultures, but it is limited. If we don't go outside of our schooling and read books and watch videos and speak to professionals who are Black, who are Afghan, who are Asian, the amount of information that we have to work with a client who's Black or some other race is very limited. And so we really have to educate ourselves. So I really want you to share a bit more about the cultural competency piece, which has been quite a big topic in our discussion today. It's been coming over and over. And the other aspect of it, I also want to address the fact that we as therapists have to be very, very sensitive to how the body language of our clients looks like, how their tone of voice is, and we have to make sure that we hone out our judgments based on, okay, this person's tone of voice is loud, so they're dangerous, or this person's tone of voice is timid, so they're abused. So we have to be aware of these biases that we have and become, very, very informed about what's going on in these rooms. And the reason I bring this up is, like I mentioned, I have clients who are boys and they're Black. And so when I sit in the room and I try to help them out through different therapy modalities like CBT or an EF, sometimes my suggestions to them are, okay, if you want to change your life, when you wake up tomorrow, what would you want to see differently so we can work towards that change? But the reality in this question is as a mental health practitioner, while I'm trying to create this goals for them and this image of what a better future looks like, the reality of where they're living, the community they're at, whether it's a low income or dangerous area, when they go back home, that change cannot happen. Their environment doesn't support that change. So can you speak a little bit about both, not just the competency of cultural competency among therapists, but this reality of we try to help out our clients, but if the environment isn't able to change, how are we supposed to motivate them to change?
Mhm. Yes, definitely. So first, I'll tackle the piece in regards to the cultural competency and training and providers such as therapists or physicians. I think, any type of person providing the services should be trained in cultural competency. And I think you mentioned something about the bias, and I think the first step is really identifying that we have it, that you as a provider have a bias towards someone that may be outside of your own culture, and that's okay, because that's something that it's innate in us. Like, we're always going to have a bias, no matter who that person is, where they come from. We're going to have it. Acknowledging that, but then also allowing yourself to be educated yourself, and allowing your client to be the one to educate you. And I think that's huge. And sometimes as providers, we kind of get into this I know what's best for you role or scenario, and that's not always the case, because that individual knows their culture, knows their background more than you would be able to understand and know it. So really catering to them in a way where you're working as a team, they're educating you, and in turn you're taking that education, using the education you have in regards to treatment modalities, and kind of creating a way to adjust that treatment modem to them, which leads into the environment, which we all know it's easy for us to say, to use coping skills, or maybe go play a sport, or listen to music, where they're going back into a poverty-ridden neighborhood that, one, their family probably can't afford to put them in after care sports, or their neighborhood may not have a park where they can go play sports. We have to also acknowledge that, and as providers, we have to get creative. We really have to understand their environment and figure out ways to help them with what limited resources they may have, and that their family may have. So it's really important that we continue to educate ourselves, and this is not going to be something that you just do in one training and it's over. This is something it's got to be done on a consistent basis. Cultures are constantly evolving. Their history, especially within the African American culture, is so rich and so deep and so rooted within this country, that this is going to be a thing that's going to need consistency and a lot of training to come.
And now, Brandon, what are some resources you can share both here in the West Coast and in the East Coast to the community? And where can we reach out for help, right? If somebody that is watching us now who needs to provide service for their family members or for their friends or neighbors, how do they do that?
So I did some research, and I found 3 organizations in the Los Angeles area that stood out to me, that I thought they're pretty interesting. And the first one is called California Black Women's Health Project. They're a nonprofit organization. They were established in 1994, and they seek to empower women and for them to take control and become active participants in their own personal health and their own personal mental health. And I think that's great to really, and I like the empowerment piece to it, because we really have to start empowering, ourselves to take more control of our health, of our mental health, and really work hard to break down those stigmas that society has created for us, and that we as a Black culture have created for ourselves as well. Another one I found to be very interesting is called Black Emotional and Mental health, and they are a group, collective of advocates. They have yoga teachers, artists, therapists, lawyers, religious leaders, teachers, psychologists, and they are all committed to the emotional and mental health of healing in the Black communities. Something that after we're going to need, the community is going to really need a lot of healing, a lot of support to get us through these tough times. And the last one I wanted to share, also located in the Los Angeles area, is called Black Visions of Wellness. And their mission is to strengthen African American communities through services including physical, mental well-being, recovery, cultural awareness, and just the appreciation of mind, body, and soul. So those were 3 organizations that I thought really stood out and really kind of addressed what we were talking about today, and really seem to have a stronghold in the community and improving the mental health and health of African Americans.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lee. For those that are watching us, we would highly request you guys to ask your questions. If you have any questions, please type it on your Facebook page. And what we'll do is we will ask those questions from Mr. Lee, and then he can answer them. So if there's any questions, please do go ahead and type away. I know there's someone.
So we have a question right now, Brandon.
We can read it all.
So the question states, what about communities that don't cater to Black communities to begin with? What type of workshops can we start with by educating our community? And this is something I'm seeing a lot. Like sometimes when these movements happen, when the Black Lives Movement does happen, or something happens in the community and people do go protest, I hear other ethnicities, other races kind of say, well, what about us? What about our community? And so there is a need of education for those communities of, yes, your life matters, the injustice that's happening in your country matters too, but you need to support what's going on right now in order to get support back as well. So can you just share more and address this question?
Yes. In regards to like rural areas, I would say what the protests and the demonstrations have brought they brought more focus to active organizations currently that are their goal is to help the Black community. And I would say reach out to them because most organizations are more than willing to provide resources to come out and speak with you, especially now that we are kind of in this COVID world of video chat. And it might be the perfect time to set up a training virtually or having someone give a speech. And then I'll always go to, researching on the internet and looking for local organizations or even national organizations that you can obtain material from and so that you can further educate yourself.
And the other question, Brendan, how important is it, getting the Black community and the African American communities getting support from other ethnic backgrounds or communities at the moment that we're seeing, right? Even when we were driving by today, Lamba and I, we saw like protesters still waiting and standing by the city hall. When we were seeing a mixture of different community members coming in and supporting really the event that had took place long ago. But how important is it to have that support?
It's very important. It shows the Black community that we matter, that people care about us, that there are people who don't want to get rid of us. It matters a lot. And I mean, personally, I've got the support of so many friends and family and people that I've known over the years who've reached out, and they've helped me get through these last couple of days of showing their support. So just like any other rough time in your life, whether it's like a death of a loved one or a traumatic experience, you need support from others to get you through. So the support that the Black community is getting right now, it might not show right now, but it's helping and it's appreciated. And I say keep it coming.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And something that I want to add in as well as is, besides protesting and going out and supporting the movement, also checking in with our Black friends, our Black neighbors, our Black mental health workers, and sending them that message of, hey, you know, I may be never able to understand, but I'm here. I'm here to support you, to stand by you, or just to be here to help you process what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I think even doing that at that level, letting know those that we love, those that are in our lives, that we're there for them. We also got another question, and it indicates, what can people do on a day-to-day basis to show their support?
What I've seen recently, just to kind of off the top of my head, there are a lot of organizations that are taking donations to provide legal support for the individuals who are being arrested during, you know, their peaceful protests. I think that's a great way. Also, just seeing and volunteering at rallies and protests, because it takes a lot of organization and manpower to create those things and make sure that they go as planned. So that's another way that you can support. And just also, you know, again, start in your own community and really look out or reach out to local organizations who are their purpose is to serve the Black community or underprivileged communities or whatever it may be. Like, support them in your own communities as well.
Another question that just came. It says, how do we keep the conversation going after the spotlight leaves? With this, you know, with what's taking place, how do we still continue the conversation of supporting?
I think this is a great way to do it, and I'm glad that you guys reach out to me, because as I'm kind of going through, I'm seeing the importance of making sure that we do keep this conversation going. And as this generation, we have an amazing tool that I like to call social media. If we want to keep something going, we have the power to keep something going. With all the platforms that we have, it's in our hands. If we want it to make sure that it keeps going, we have the power. They can't really take that away from us, and that's something that is great. And I think if we just remember that we have that power and that ability to keep, you know, making sure these issues are addressed in the world, I think we'll be okay.
Thank you for stating that, because you mentioned something really important earlier, which was this notion of when people support us, you know, it allows us to know that there's someone there for us and that individuals are not trying to get rid of us. Yes. And I wrote it down because that was such a powerful statement. And right now you just mentioned this whole idea of power of, you know, when we're out there, when we're seeing the support, when it's going on the social media, we are feeling powerful because we're supported, we're loved by our community, we're loved by other communities. So I think, you know, something that I'm taking away from this is, by showing support, by loving each other, you know, not only are we empowering individuals and instilling power, but we're letting them know that this is where they belong and this is where we want them to stay. So
yes, exactly.
For saying that.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and thank you for this great you know, talk and message that you give and answered questions. You know, it is a difficult time, and it's a time where we're trying to seek, you know, answers from experts like yourself and from folks within the community, right? One thing I usually tell individuals, or if I see something happening in a different community, let's say like the Black community, if somebody's going through brutality, I can't explain, you know, what that individual experiences, right? Because again, I have different experiences. I will not be, you know, tormented for how I look. So I can't answer those questions, right? And that is why, you know, we want to thank you so much for coming here and being with us for answering these questions.
No, thanks for having me. I'm glad that we were able to do this, and it's great to see you guys again. I don't know if people know that me and Wali went to graduate school together. So any chance I get to see him, I'll pick it up.
Yeah, no, thank you again for mentioning that too. Me and Brandon, we do go back about 7 years, about 7 years where we started our graduate program, and that's where we met, and our friendship, our educational goals started to further our education. And he's in Boston, I'm in the West Coast, so we're in two different parts of the country, but we try to do what we can to address challenges and situations in our respective fields.
So once again, we want to thank you so much, Brandon. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for bringing light to this important topic. And
thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
But also educating the community. And then we also want to, give a shout out to Jonathan Webb, who, last minute made time for us to do the sign language for this program, which is so important. So thank you so much, Jonathan Webb, for making the time and, translating this workshop, this seminar into sign language.
And also through that too, we also want to be able to thank the person who actually did request the sign language, was Miss Belinda. She works with the Orange County Healthcare Agency, and she was able to support us in putting this together, which we need to consider in the future for sure. So thank you so much for all of it.
So as we are wrapping up, we do want to send out a message to the community who's watching us right now and allow you guys to tell you guys to go ahead and like us and follow us, because we'll continue having really important programs that are addressing mental health in different communities, as well as looking at the current climate of this country. So please like us, please follow us, because that's how Facebook is going to show our videos to you guys. It's going to be a priority on your timeline when you guys follow us.
Don't forget to follow us, folks.
Thank you so
very
much.
And any last remarks, Brandon, that you like to give to the community before we?
Just again, be there for one another, love each other, and we will get through this. And there are better days to come. So just remember that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.